This slide is dealing with the money multiplier, or as it's sometimes called, the deposit expansion multiplier. The first thing let's look at, look at this. The 75 plus 25 is going to equal 100. The 18 plus the 16 is going to be 25. The $4 and change plus the 1 and change is going to be the 625. So in other words, what we're dealing in this frame is we're dividing it up into two parcels. One's going to be called a required reserve and one's going to be called an excess reserve. And in this example, the author has chosen to use a reserve requirement of 75%. Now, I think this is a mistake on the author's part. I think he just overlooked it. Usually it's the other way around. Usually in most textbooks they use a reserve requirement of 25%, but for some reason they haven't done it this time, so let's just go through the math and make sure we understand it. So what it means when you have a required reserve of 75%, it means you have to keep 75% of the demand deposit on hold in the form of a required reserve. So on the initial deposit of $100 over here, the $75 is required. That frees up the difference between 75 and 100 is $25, and so that excess reserve is what can be lent out. So the first loan of $25 comes over here to this bank, and then with the $25, 75% of it has to be kept on hand in the form of a required reserve, so that's $18.75, which leaves $6.25 to be lent over to Bank 3, and then Bank 3 is required to keep 75% of $6.25, which is this figure here, and the difference is what can be lent out. $1.56 can be lent out, etc., etc. And so that's the iteration, that's the way things progress in terms of the money multiplier. And now let's look at the formula. The formula is straightforward. So there we go. So it says the maximum potential expansion of the money supply excuse me, is equal to whatever the money multiplier is times the excess reserves. And so let's fill that in and see how that works. So the reserve requirement was 75%, so the multiplier is 1 divided by 75%, or 1 divided by 3/4, which is 4/3, which is 1.33. And if in the initial frame there we had $25 worth of excess reserve, so $25 times this 1.33 gives us $33.25 as the maximum possible expansion of the money supply. And so this iteration is how the Federal Reserve, using its controls, the levers that we've seen, this is the way that they can expand or contract the money supply.